Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this, our second in a research series, focusing on tackling inequity for young people who are trying to get to the world of employment. The first report that we produced was addressing race inequity through exclusion, and this webinar today is focused on young people with learning disabilities and autism. We've got an expert panel here to answer questions. The Q&A is open. Please put your questions in there and we'll answer them during the course of the webinar. We are also recording this session in case you're not able to stay for the whole thing, and we will be sending out a transcript after this session. If you want to turn on captions or a transcription, there is an option for you to do it yourselves. So this is a really important topic. It's a really hot topic. I'm aware of two other reports just this week that have been launched focusing on issues young people are facing who are excluded from or are not in education, employment and training. And some of you will also be aware of the increased challenges that young people with learning disabilities and autism face. You may or may not be aware of the shockingly low figure of 4.7% of people with learning disabilities who are in paid work. Employment rates are really low, and opportunities are limited. And you add the other pressures at the moment from potential changes to benefit systems. This system is failing young people with learning disabilities. We're all trying to find positive solutions to this. Research shows that young people with learning disabilities are really loyal workers when they get into paid employment. And they stay in jobs longer than their peers. Employers also tell us that they want to employ more people with disabilities. They want to be more inclusive. So what can we do to help both young people and employers? It was with all of this in mind that in 2017, ThinkForward designed a new program to support young people with learning disabilities and autism. It was supported by DFN Foundation, by Life Chances Fund, and by Big Issue Invest. DFN Move Forward ran for 5 years, from 2018 to the beginning of 2023. It provided tailored coaching, insights into the world of work, and work experience for over 280 young people. At the end of the program, over 70% of those young people of working age who were still enrolled in the program had paid jobs. That's 15 times the national average of 4.7%. The cost of running the program was totally outweighed by the value it delivered, with over £3 of social value created for every pound invested. As well as a social return on investment study, ThinkForward also commissioned research, both qualitative and quantitative, into the program. This research covered every aspect of the program, ran for over 3 years, and I want to thank the many research companies, consultants, companies, analysts, and ThinkForward staff who contributed to creating this body of work. The research came out with 4 main recommendations. It focused on qualified coaches at the core of the program. It emphasized the fact that a program created and designed by young people for young people with their aspirations in mind were likely to be more successful. It focused on the employer as well as the young person, and it also looked at wraparound support for young people from their families. But we're going to focus today on 2 of those. Those who transitioned to employment, education, or training were far more likely to have received a high level of one-to-one tailored coaching And they were also more likely to be successful if they attended 9 or more ready for work events through our program. This built in their ready for work skills such as resilience, their ability to travel independently, and also their self-assuredness. Secondly, we successfully designed program elements to make sure employers understood the challenge and the needs that young people with learning disabilities were facing. So they could support them better, they could nurture them better, and they could be more attuned to the skills and their own talents. We'll discuss how adapting and tailoring the programme for both young people and employers works in practice. But before we do that, let's just hear from a few of those young people, from Jodie, Matthew and David, who are on the programme, and all of whom are now in paid jobs. I'm sorry for the time lag on this. That's a Zoom thing.
Before, when I started, I was not confident, whereas when I met Kerry, my confidence was growing and growing, and now I can do so much more with Kerry's help. My job now is working as a cleaner in a school, and I just really enjoy my job. Every single day is just like new experiences. You don't know what you're going to come across every single day when you come in. I'm having my own money come in. I've got my own savings account, saving up for a house. I've become more independent at home, do my own shopping, I travel on my own.
One lesson I learned from the programme is that I'm capable and a hard worker. When I left school, I didn't imagine myself being in work. I imagined myself still being in like college, doing courses there, but now I've got a job. It's very it's a surprise to me. The way that Tasha has helped me the most is that she's been very supportive of me, teaching me how to do my CV, interviews, and the general workplace of how to behave. Having a job for me means that I have more freedom to do what I like, may that be my hobbies and getting a car when I eventually pass my test, as well as hopefully travelling around the world, hopefully to Japan or somewhere.
The lesson I learned from this program was preparation for employment, as I want to get my skills up through customer service, as I want to become a train driver one day. The skills that I've learned during the program was emails and what to expect in the workforce, and what we should do and how to act professionals. The way the coaches have helped me move forward in the ThinkForward program is that they recognise my potential and my passion to where I want to be. Especially when it comes to transport, it's where I'm the most hungry at, as I never stop talking about transport.
Courageous, willing, and just being brave.
Fun, interesting and worthwhile.
Honoured, grateful, and I'd say recognised.
Thank you to all of them. Passion, being recognised. This is why we do the work we do. I'd like now to introduce our panel of experts. Laura Davis is CEO of the British Association for Supported Employment. Is passionate in the belief that employment should be for everybody. Debbie Robinson is CEO and founder of Kaleidoscope, a social enterprise that focuses on supporting local areas to deliver improved outcomes for people with learning disabilities. And Vinny DeFalco is head of supported employment programs at ThinkForward and has been involved in this program since its inception. One of the key findings from our research was that a valued feature of the program was the extent to which progression coaches tailor delivery to the skills and aspirations of young people, helping them to connect to suitable opportunities. And I'd like to come to you first, Vinny. As you delivered the program, and I'd like to ask you, how did it support young people, and especially how did it support their aspirations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the program wasn't just about coaching, although of course coaching is a big part of that holistic wraparound. It was really about creating a space where young people could truly explore their aspirations, but also be recognised and recognise their own wealth of skills that they already had. And receive tailored person-centred support to turn those aspirations into true reality. So as mentioned previously by self, Robert, we delivered one-to-one holistic coaching, group sessions on work readiness, ready for work insights, and also engaged parents and carers and guardians in the journey too. But beyond that, we gave young people a structured yet flexible framework in order for them to navigate that overwhelming transition into adulthood. For me as a coach, I think using the principles of coaching was a real game changer. So it really allowed me to give the young people an opportunity to have a sense of empowerment, not just by highlighting their skills, but also by providing them real world insights and experiences that really help them to make informed decisions about their next steps. So it wasn't really just about what they could do, but it's about what they wanted to do. So giving them that choice. Oftentimes, this cohort of young people have heard so much about what they can't do. So it's really important to highlight that choice for them and what they could and what they wanted to do. So crucially, I think as a coach, coaches became that one consistent adult at the centre of that young person's journey, offering them a sounding board, providing them with an opportunity for accountability, but also that belief in their potential. And I think the coach acted really well as a navigator and a connector of opportunities, and someone feeding back to that circle of support, helping the individual, helping their families, but also making sense of that complex pathway into employment and adulthood, but also being the expert in that geographical area with all the different nuances that you might come across in different geographies. So the way that I always saw the programme was as a bit of a launch pad. I saw the life-changing impact myself as a coach, and the support that was given firsthand. And to be honest, it was a real pleasure to be involved in that.
And one of the findings of the research was that actually for these young people, it took them quite a long time to get from school to a final destination of paid employment. On average, 3.7 transitions between school and getting a paid job. Laura, what additional challenges do you think young people with learning disabilities face in seeking employment, and what can we do about it?
Absolutely. I think there are multiple barriers for young people with a learning disability, and it starts from being little, that kind of low aspiration from a very young age around what people can potentially achieve in their lives. I always tell a story about when my children were little and being in nursery, and them going around in the nursery and asking children what they wanted to be when they grew up. And there was a boy in the room that said he wanted to be a bus, and nobody said anything about that. But actually, they skipped over a child with a learning disability. And when I asked the adults in the room why they did that, they felt that they'd be setting that child up to fail. So even from the age of 3 and 4, they'd already made a decision that that young person probably wasn't going to be employable. And so I think there's a lot of work that we need to do to start thinking about how do we raise ambition with young people, with their families, and within the education system, that work should absolutely be for everybody. I think there are also lots of challenges around kind of the myths that exist within the world of business. So we hear from lots of employers this kind of concept around who's employable and who's not. Employers quite often think that it's really expensive to think about adjustments for somebody with a learning disability, where we know the average cost of an adjustment is £75, and actually lots of them are free. It's just doing things in a different way. And actually you get it right for this group of individuals, you're going to get it right for lots of other people. I know Vinny and Debbie, we've had conversations about some brilliant examples of where you put in an adjustment for people with a learning disability and the whole workforce say, why have we never done this before? It just makes so much sense. I think there are challenges around the welfare benefit system that need to be addressed. We need to give people hope. We need to make sure that total family income is protected so that people can dream and give things a go without the fear of kind of being penalised. So I think, one of the biggest challenges is around how do we start to join all of the dots together from education, very young, right the way through to business. In terms of what I think we can do to address those challenges, I think there is a network of organisations out there that are doing this. They are doing this day in and day out and delivering really good quality supported employment. It's wonderful to see the government actually investing in the Connect to Work programme, which is using the supported employment model at the heart of it. But we need join up between that and what's happening in the apprenticeship space, what's happening within supported internships. And I think we have an opportunity across government to really start doing that. I guess my biggest request of them is to start speaking to the experts who are delivering these programs all of the time, that have the answers around how that join up could work.
And we have experts here as well. Debbie, what else do you think that we can do to join things up and address this lack of aspiration potentially, but also the challenges that Laura and Vinny have been outlining?
I think we need to listen to families. They have spent a lifetime, or the lifetime of their young person, trying to get the best out of the system for their young person. We need to start having those conversations around increasing aspirations much earlier, so that the fear that Laura talked about in terms of employing people, but there's also that fear with families in terms of any parent letting go to the big bad world of work. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And how can we have those conversations early with families so that they're not so fearful? We can't do any of this without families being engaged in the process, but for lots of reasons. So joining the dots with families much earlier, having those conversations so people are aspiring to go to work and not hanging on to their education, health and care plan for dear life, because that's their passport, if you like, to other things. We also need to listen to employers. We've got some amazing employers who go above and beyond and who've got ideas themselves about how we can become more inclusive. Just this week, I received an email from an employer where one of our young people has been doing some work experience, and they wanted to know, if we can encourage them at the end of that work experience, if we could encourage them to apply for one of their positions. So that's not even us having to do the hard work. That young person has done all of that hard work themselves. They've demonstrated what they can do, and they've delivered and gone above and beyond. So the employer is encouraging them to apply. And we need to share all of those stories, because there's still, as Laura said, there's still these myths around, what we can and what we can't do, and what inclusive employment looks like, and how HR processes need to change. Employers are doing that already. We're doing some amazing work with some of our employers where we're supporting them. Where people are applying for jobs, they come to us first to talk about their reasonable adjustments, and then they go through the application process. So there's lots of work. And, I've been in this field for over 30 years, and I've seen lots of changes. Connect to Work is new in a sense, but it's not new in another way. It's a different way of looking at things, but there's so much more still to do. 4.7% is not acceptable.
And it hasn't changed that much. So, all of these initiatives, and, there's another launch of another campaign and another change in the focus. I understand that the Disability Confident campaign has got something like 19,000 companies signed up. But I think one of you told me that they don't employ proportionately any more people with disabilities than other organizations. What's going on here when all of us are trying to address all of this? And we know that there are young people out there desperate to work.
I think we have to show, sorry, I think we have to show them the way. I think we have to show them the way. I mean, you've got sort of 600 with leadership status. Well, we know who the leaders are, and we can see what they're doing, but we need more people to take that extra step and to actually understand what needs to be in place to support people. As I said, it's about sharing that information and getting out there and showcasing our young people. That video was just amazing, how confident those young people come across in terms of their experience and where they thought they'd be before they came on the programme. I've been working alongside ThinkForward for a number of years now, probably 4 or 5, maybe longer. And I've seen the difference that it makes, that preparation before they even come on a supported internship. It makes such a difference to moving them forward at a pace that's going to increase their skills, increase their confidence, and their self-esteem and self-determination, which is really important. So yeah, we are all in this, and we just need to keep pushing the envelope.
Absolutely. I think sorry if you don't mind, Robert, but I was thinking,
Carry on.
yeah, the it's kind of just under 20,000 employers that are now signed up to Disability Confident, because there's been quite a big campaign about getting employers to sign up, which is wonderful. But speaking to kind of business across the UK on a regular basis, they're all telling me the same thing, which is they intellectually get why this makes sense. They know that this isn't just about early career planning, that actually if they're going to future-proof their organisation, 80% of disabilities are acquired during the lifetime of someone working for you. We're an aging population. If they start getting this right for people with a learning disability, then they future-proof their organisation. But they tell me the same thing. They get the why, they don't understand the how. And when they get to doing things like, what do we now do about our adjustments process? What does an adjustment look like for somebody with a learning disability? How do we adapt our recruitment processes, our onboarding process, when they look at that total life cycle of an employee and think about people with a learning disability and autism? They get stuck. And I think, again, people around the room are doing this, are able to show an employer, to take them from that kind of intellectual understanding of why into the how. These are the practical steps. But I do think that there's more that government could be doing to actually start to promote the principles of supported employment as one of the vehicles to supporting employers to embed really good practice into their hiring programs.
Benita, do you want to come in on there?
No, I think it's just an agreement in terms of kind of what Debbie and Laura have put forward there. I think it's about showing the employers how, giving them that step-by-step guidance, getting them to understand the benefits of place, train and maintain. Those are really, really important parts of it. So just in total agreement of everything that's been said there, really.
Sorry, Robert, I think there's just a couple more things to add in terms of what is the offer to employers? Can we, how much more can we make that explicit to employers? So again, their fear, misconceptions, and this can be heard and understood and dealt with, if you like. We have the disability confident scheme, as you said, but as a supported employment provider, maybe it's incumbent upon us to share what we have to offer to employers in terms of those professional employment specialists who are trained to national standards, which BASE have put together, and the support employment training, so that they can feel confident about employing people, because they know that they're going to have the support to back up their staff if they get nervous or anxious about taking somebody on. We can go in, we learn those job roles, so therefore we can help those young people skills build and broker those relationships with their staff and the young people. So we're going in and we're kind of building that network around that young person, and then we're fading off. So all of that support, if we're making that explicit to employers, it takes that kind of anxiousness and the how bit out of it a little bit. So we perhaps could go a bit further with that.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from the floor, and I encourage all attendees, please put in your questions into the Q&A and we will try and address them. And the question really is about one of the research findings. It's from Julia. Why do you think this group of young people take more transitions to go from school to getting a job?
If I can take the first one to this, I think there's something about the amount of time that it might take a young person with a learning disability to kind of move through different stages of, of education and that transition. But it's also the kind of amount of choices, I guess, and kind of, as I was saying before, the navigation piece that needs to be done there. There are, dependent on it's kind of a bit of a postcode lottery. There are so many different options for transition in different geographies. So I think that navigation piece is so important, and that kind of that lends itself to kind of why the transition might kind of take longer. I think there's something about confidence as well, and that could be the confidence of the young person, but also the system around them, and also families too. So I think there's something for us to do there in terms of boosting the confidence of the young person. We do a lot of that, obviously, within our programs. Confidence is one of our work readiness capabilities, but that absolutely needs to be, lend itself to young people and families and the system around them as well.
I think also it's the young people's stories, their history. So their families may have spent quite a number of years expressing the very worst of what their condition might bring to the table because they need to get a service. And we come along as supported employment providers and working on supported internships, and we say, oh, well, we can get them a job in 10 months. So it's changing their story and getting them to believe that what happened in the past is all part of the journey and it's part of growing up, but you can change that outcome. And understanding what that journey was like for the young person, understanding what that journey was like for their family, and gradually bring them along to the understanding of what their story can be from this point forward. So raising those expectations, raising those standards, raising those aspirations, and making that part of their forward journey, I think is hugely important.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of adding on to both of those points. I think actually, if you don't start talking to young people about employment until they're 16, 17, which is the reality for lots of people with a learning disability, you can then well imagine why it's going to take a bit longer for them to transition their way through into a pathway that leads to employment. I think for some young people, the education healthcare plan is part of the challenge. I'm the mother of my eldest daughter has a learning disability, and I look at her peer group and think about how many of those families, as Debbie beautifully described earlier, like trying to cling on to the education healthcare plan as long as you possibly can. And so we'll transition into different programs just to keep the plan rather than it being about the right next step for young people. So I think ways that we can go back to a space where young people can dream and hope and try things, but without fear of having all of that support removed, would really help to bring down the number of transitions that they go through in order to get a job at the end of it.
Yeah.
We've had a question from Brian Taylor. What are your views or experience of 1-year supported internships? And he's asking, would a 2 or 3 year model work better?
It's a question of we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes our young people do very well on a 1-year program because we have been very explicit and very clear about the expectations and the aspirations and where we're headed with that. And we engage with families before people sign up to a program. It's quite a sophisticated process. So if families aren't ready, we're not going to force anybody down that route. There's no point. We want to bring people to the table early. As Laura said, we need to be having these conversations much earlier in somebody's life. And we need to be kind of working alongside parents, carers, guardians to be making sure that they're providing that kind of work opportunity for people at home, for young people at home. Simple things. I wasn't allowed out to play when I was younger until I'd done my chores. That might sound very old-fashioned, but I'm quite the other end of the working age. But that was a fact. It was an expectation that I get a weekend job, because if I wanted to buy things, then I had to earn the money to do that. Now, I get that that's not straightforward, but those things can be put in place in a much smaller way for people, and also a much bigger way. So there is that. And I think, involving families and having those conversations and bringing them to the table to understand what their fears and aspirations and expectations are, and then helping to shift that dialogue is also quite crucial.
I think we need to be clear that a supported internship has an evidence base around it, and it lasts the period of time that it does for a reason, because we know that it works. But that isn't the only option for young people, nor should it be. Imagine when I was young, if somebody said this is the only pathway that you have to go down. I certainly wouldn't be doing the career that I'm doing now. So we need to remember that there are a whole range of study programs that young people could do that are a bit more bespoke. And if a young person isn't ready for a supported internship, that good quality work experience might be the right thing for them. But once somebody goes onto a supported internship, the expectation, as Debbie's just described, has to be about getting a paid job. So I do worry a little bit about building kind of a 3-year model, because I think we could start drifting back into a space where young people are doing training forever. And actually, I've never been ready for any job I've ever done in my entire life. I am still not ready for the job that I'm doing now. I've had a certain amount of strengths and skills, and then I've got a job and I've actually then learnt on the job. And I think we need to apply that same methodology for young people with a learning disability. So I think I understand why people talk about adding on more years to an internship, but I worry that we then end up going backwards to a space where young people are doing endless work preparation for jobs that they'll probably never be fully prepared for, and we just need to get them into work and then train them up there.
And
Yeah, I think
our schools and colleges are doing amazing work preparing people for work. You have job coaches working in schools and colleges who are working alongside families and young people before they do a program of study, like a supported internship. And I agree with what Laura said. There are lots of different ways, and it's about listening, understanding, and working out what's the best option for that young person so that they can progress within whatever time frame they feel confident or comfortable with. But yeah, as Laura said, we don't want people to be going year on year on year, just doing the same thing for the sake of ticking a box to say, yes, they're engaged in whatever it might be.
And I think we've seen experience of it, getting more and more qualifications, which aren't helping move forward, doing more and more work experience. But work experience is often very, very short. And Vinny, we have been involved, I think, in some extended work placements, which are slightly different. How has that worked out?
Yeah, so from our perspective, running the extended recruitment programs that we've been running with, for example, one of our partners, DHL, that's been a really great way to really get young people to experience what it's like to work in a warehouse role, for example, but really kind of structuring that so that they get a chance to have 2 insight days where they really understand the employer, they get to meet people, they get to understand the role and the setting in which they'll be working in, and then having a very set amount of an experience of work within that role and that workplace. But also alongside that, having feedback, support from their coach, support from a mentor and manager. And we've had quite a lot of success actually moving young people into work through that particular program. And that's, through the support of an amazing, brilliant employer, but also the kind of structure that's been wrapped around that program. And the training that we've offered, and also the opportunities in context that young person gets when they are in that setting. I think we talk a lot about kind of work experience, or I tend to call it an experience of work, because I think the work experience connotation is slightly different. My work experience connotation was making tea when I was when I was in school, so a bit of a different scenario. So when I call it an experience of work, it's really about that context. That context is so important. I work with young people who came to me and said, I've got an idea of, I want to be a plumber, for example. So I said, okay, well, have you ever had any experience in that context? And it turns out they hadn't, but they had a family member who was a plumber. When they actually got the experience in context, that was not the job for them. So it's all about understanding in context, really having that wraparound support. What kind of skills you might be able to kind of lend yourself to what kind of role. So I'm really proud of our extended recruitment program, because I think it's worked so brilliantly in leveraging opportunities, having vacancies at the end of those opportunities. And I think, we've seen some real success, and hopefully we'll continue to see those successes with other employers as well.
We have another question from
Sorry,
from the floor. Sorry, Debbie, carry on, please.
To pick up on Vinny's point about the in context part, because I think that's important. So, when people are talking and exploring their options around work, we have to look at what else needs to be in context. So it's are they able to travel? Can they get, and do they need travel training? That's a massive context in which can impact or good or negatively on somebody's journey into work. That support that they get from the family and the encouragement that they get from the family is in context. So I think we have to think about those wraparound services that Vinny was talking about. When things get difficult, we don't just say, no, you can't manage in the workplace. What other support services can be put in place to help them manage those anxieties if they're feeling anxious about coming in? So all of that puts it into context, I think.
We've had another question from Bill Pike. In your experience, what sort of roles have worked best for transitioning into permanent employment? And I think what I'm hearing is it's very individual to the person.
As it should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Some people come on our programs with a very fixed idea about what they want to do because of an experience that they've had at school. So often it's IT or childcare. And then when they come on a program, we say to them, what is it about IT that you like? And they're not sure. And what is it about childcare that you like? And we try and unpack that for people. And as Vinny said with the plumber example, what somebody might think working with working with children in a hospital setting, for example, is very different than what it actually is. So again, in context, and IT, it's as broad as long as it's tall as it's wide. So it's about having the experience in different settings to break down and understand what is it that that young person wants. In terms of successes in job outcomes, again, when I started delivering project search programs many years ago, about 14 now, we had a young person who didn't know what they wanted to do, was fairly disruptive, and then we found a very systematic, complex task, which was endoscopy reprocessing. I didn't even know what that was when he first started. And at 17, he got a job as a band 3 endoscopy reprocessing technician. Still working 10 years later across 3 different hospitals in that particular trust and supporting our current interns as they progress and go forward. So again, from school, very disruptive, and ends up being an endoscopy reprocessing technician. We've got people that want to come in and be domestics because they like cleaning. So I think it's individual, and I think we have to explore what their interests are and what we can do with those interests.
Absolutely. And I think equally on the flip side of that, you have employers will ask the same question, like, what jobs can people do? You said, well, what jobs have you got? What vacancies do you have? What do you need people to do? Because actually, if you're following the 5-stage model and matching the right person into the right role and in the right kind of culture, actually there should be no job that's completely off the table. There might be a different way of doing something, but yeah, I think it's about, as Debbie just described, you start with the dreams, aspirations, hopes and talents of a young person, then the business needs of an employer, and you start matching the two together. I've seen across the UK some of the most wonderful jobs that people are doing, again, jobs that I wish someone had told me about when I was at school, because I didn't even know they existed. But that also goes back to kind of careers guidance for young people with a learning disability and the lack of it. Again, I can talk from personal experience. My daughter had a half-an-hour careers guidance session with somebody who had no understanding of working with people with a learning disability. Not that member of staff's fault. They were just trying to do the very best that they could within a half-an-hour period. And she came back to me saying, right, I'm going to go to college and do a sports leadership course, which she would never have the qualifications to have done. And so actually they weren't given the time, but that's where supported employment is amazing, through that vocational profiling, where you build up a really rich picture of who somebody is. So I think it's about, start with the young person, their dreams, aspirations. What does an employer need? And then we match the two together.
And then when we get them together, and the young person has an opportunity to apply for a role, how do you think employers are approaching the recruitment process for young people with learning disabilities?
In my, it's varied. as I said, I just got an email this week from an employer saying we want this young person to apply for positions, and they're encouraging us to encourage this young person to apply. Other employers, having spent some time with people, are still kind of nervous. So I think it's varied, but it's about building relationships. So as a supported employment provider, we go out and we do as part of the 5-stage model, it's that kind of employer engagement aspect, but it's the engagement with the young person, it's engagement with the communities and bringing all of that together. But the employer engagement is around building that relationship and helping them understand what's possible, and how they can do that. But the experience is varied.
Absolutely. I mean,
And
I'm seeing, oh, sorry, Robert. I was
carry
just
on.
going to say, I'm seeing a real shift in employers actually. So I've again worked in supported employer for kind of over 20 years. And when I started, there was very much a kind of like, we have a recruitment process. Yes, we'd be interested in employing some people with a learning disability, but they have to still go through the same routes as everybody else. And we're starting to see quite a shift from that. We've got 1.3 million job vacancies in the UK at the moment. Employers are starting to recognize that if they do the same thing, they're going to get the same people. And so maybe that they need to think about the recruitment process itself as being one of the biggest barriers. You know, it massively lends itself to people who are good at sales. So actually, if you can sell your way through an interview, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the right person for the job. And so we're seeing more and more employers that are now starting to build completely different pathways for people into employment. So through working interviews and work trials, where people don't even have to fill in an application form at all. And I think we need to start taking that movement and really building it into the disability confident process as an example of very best practice. So almost like employers have that blueprint about what different can look like, and that it doesn't affect the bottom line and it doesn't have to be more complex. So I think we're starting to see a shift in employers' attitudes about how they can kind of manage recruitment and onboarding in a different way.
And
I
Vinny,
think
can
employers
we?
forget, sorry, I think employers forget that they have a probationary period.
Yeah, yeah,
And we support all the way through that, but they have that if they want to get out clause because they're a bit nervous, they have a probationary period, but we wouldn't encourage them to
yeah.
use them in that way, but it's there.
Well, that's very true. But even before that, Vinny, I think that you've done some things where you're actually encouraging employers to look at that process in a different way. You've run some reverse job fairs. So starting there, what else have you been doing?
Absolutely. So the reverse jobs fairs were a really good kind of starting point. I think, as Debbie said, it's all about the employer relationship, really, in terms of building that confidence in them, building the receptiveness in the employer as well. We through our reverse jobs fairs, we've had some really great job outcomes, but also pledges around, commitment to supporting young people to get an insight and an experience of work if there aren't any vacancies at that current point, opportunities to kind of stay in touch and support with preparation for work trials and working interviews as well. So that's kind of, that's worked really, really well. Some of the other stuff that we've been doing is having conversations with employers, allowing them to kind of have a drop-in space with us to talk to us about their kind of needs, their business needs. So we do that a lot when it comes to talking to our employers. And as Laura said, and Debbie, it really is about kind of matching the young person and, their aspirations, their hopes, their what they want from their future to kind of what is out there in the labour market. And we hear so much from our employers about the jobs, the vacancies that they find really, really hard to fill. So, we look at kind of understanding those jobs, understanding those roles and trying to break down what the tasks in those roles might look like and how those young people can get an experience of that. So often it's about us giving the employer the confidence and kind of giving them some hand holding and then guiding them through as they go along on the journey and kind of saying, we're still here to support, but you can do this, and empowering them as well.
I delivered some training to an employer yesterday, and this is the theme that comes up quite a lot. I don't think employers always understand that under employment law, they can actually take proactive action. They can take positive action for people who are disabled. It's the one protected characteristic you are allowed to do it for. Now, we can have a whole debate and a conversation about whether that's right or wrong, but they are able to do it. And so actually, again, once employers kind of realize that and recognize that particularly people with a learning disability are the most excluded group from the workforce, again, we're starting to see more employers saying, actually, we've got to do something very different and to think about actually ring fencing some roles and doing something different in terms of that recruitment process. So again, I kind of urge all of our supported employment providers to have that in their toolkit in the conversations that they're having with employers around what is possible.
We've got another question from the floor. Thank you, Sergio Sanchez, for asking this, because it takes the conversation to the next step, which is what's more important for young people to sustain jobs long term? Is it how the role fits them in the first instance, or is it the wraparound support that they receive once they're in the job?
I think it's both. I think they need both.
Right.
Obviously, the job matching and making sure the role's a good fit in the first place is paramount, and supporting the employer to support the young person, letting them know that in-work support is available, but that's just as important for the young person. The wraparound support for the young person, I think, again, is crucial. Letting them know that there is this kind of safety net, if you like, people that they can go to, people that they can call on if they need some support, and how we broker those relationships. So eventually that support fades because that young person now feels comfortable and confident, but knowing that they can call it back in should they need it in the future. So often we find it could be something as simple as the fact that somebody's line manager has changed and their character is different to what they're used to. So we would go in and broker that relationship again, and that's having that kind of wraparound support. But for the young person and their families, knowing that there's a safety net there, but also for the employer.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's absolutely, when you look at the 5 stages of supported employment, all of those stages are in there for a reason, because it's actually the total 5 stages that achieves the best outcomes. One of the things that we do know is that supported internships or youth-focused programs that have good connections with adult supported employment tend to achieve far better sustainment rates than those that don't. Because as Debbie just described, things happen. They might get a different line manager, but also we need to start having conversations about building careers for young people with a learning disability. This shouldn't just be about getting a job. I'm certainly not doing the same job I did when I was 17, 18, 19. I was a waitress, I was rubbish at it. But we need to start thinking about, how do we plan for where somebody wants to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? And so that's where the partnerships that, I can see colleagues around the screen here have built these beautiful partnerships that are not just about getting people into a job. It's about how do we start building a program of support that is supporting both the individual and the employer on an ongoing basis.
Agreed. That brings me back to vocational profiling just very quickly. I think that's the kind of crux of where it starts, that skills and job match at the beginning, about how that vocational profile is owned by the young person, the young adult, as they move through different transitions. But also, just to mention it, the importance of having support via access to work as well. We know access to work is something that can support a young person, a young adult, an adult in work too. So it's just something to bear in mind, that both of those things are really important, and there are mechanisms of support which are available to continue when they are in the job, to support the young person.
ThinkForward produced an asset-based language guide last year, and we're updating it at the moment. And it seems to me that language being used by us in the sector, but also by employers, it needs to be meaningful to them. And I wonder that if that in itself is a barrier, the way in which we talk about the needs and the aspirations of young people. Is that something that you feel we need to address as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, oh, sorry, Vinny, you go.
No, no, you go for it. Sorry.
I think there's definitely something around language and being careful that we don't bring the language of kind of education through into the world of business, because actually, the two don't always match up. I think the more that we can embed the social model of disability into absolutely everything we do, so we start promoting the things that young people can do, the huge potential, the strengths and the asset that they have. I still hear a little bit of kind of individuals going in and talking about employers' corporate social responsibility agenda around employing people with a learning disability, or we've got some really sweet people that would like a job. It's absolutely not. We have got a hidden talent pool of individuals that are highly motivated to work, and you have got vacancies. And I think, that's a really important piece. I also think some of the language around disability is really scary to employers. I talked to an employer yesterday that was talking about, oh, what's the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent? And what if I get it wrong? And what if I upset someone? And it can actually stop people from engaging in this space altogether. So I think being part of the conversation around, I always say to employees, look, I'm not the language police. I'm here to support you. Tell me stuff and I'll tell you if it's wrong. I'll tell you if it's not language that you should be using, but I don't want the language to be the thing that prevents you from engaging with us in the first place. So I think it's definitely something we need to be mindful of. And my last point is around, we hear lots of organisations talking about employment support, and we need to be really clear that employment support and supported employment are not the same thing. And so we have to make an additional effort when we're talking to families, to young people and to employers, the huge differences in the two models and why supported employment is so much more effective for this group of young people.
And you don't think that's understood?
I think it's still really, I think people find it very confusing. So again, we had things like the Work and Health Programme, which was the main DWP programme that was run for people who were disabled and had long-term health conditions. And what they delivered was employment support, which is about, you work with people, you give them some kind of confidence boosting, help to write a CV, and then you get them out into a job. And for some people, that's absolutely the right model for them. That's what they need. But we know for this group of young people, it didn't and it doesn't work. And employers have sometimes had a poor experience of that employment support, again, specifically talking about for this group of young people, whereby somebody was put into a job, didn't receive the right level of support, it wasn't well matched, and individuals go into the labour market and then dip back out again, which is really damaging for that person, but also from that employer's perspective. Actually, it's damaging for them. And so when we come in and talk about supported employment, if they've had that previous experience, they'll go, oh no, I've done that before and it didn't work. And actually it was terrible. So we really need to kind of build that language in of why the work that we do is so different and why it works. And it's actually a really amazing opportunity for employers to start to build the confidence that they need to, to really start to kind of embed and embrace people with a learning disability in their workforce planning.
Just to add to that, in terms of the language, often we're asked to go in and kind of work with teams to support them, to support the young person they're working with. We never lead with disability awareness training, because then people start looking for signs, symptoms, and get sort of embroiled in the nitty-gritty that isn't important. I'm not saying it's not important, but in this context, again, context is everything. So we often say we'll come in and we'll show you how to get the best out of working with this person. There may be a conversation about how their particular condition or set of circumstances may impact on their ability to do a part of the job of work. But we never lead with this is disability awareness training, because it's not. It's about the young person that we're working with, and it's about how to get the best out of them and how to support them whilst they're working. So
I've heard lots of useful information here. This has been a really interesting conversation. It hasn't been a Q&A, it's been a conversation. Thank you for interrupting and talking. And, one of the things that's really stood out for me from this conversation is we've been talking about jobs, and I do this, we do this, but why are we talking about careers? Why are we talking about long-term careers for young people with learning disabilities, not looking just at the first job? And thank you for bringing that light bulb to me, because I think that that's a really important thing. Aspirations of young people, but also their families, and making sure that there's early support for those families, so they can see what the art of the possible might be. Practical experience for employers. Don't be scared of it. I really like that, Debbie, that, you know, let's not go in telling you what you ought to be doing, you know, and this isn't awareness training, you know, showcasing. And it's up to all of us and everybody in this webinar. Let's showcase the successes and so on. This has been a really engaging, valuable and insightful discussion. And I thank you all for it. I want to thank people for putting in questions. If you've got any last ones that haven't been answered, we will answer them after this. Thank you to the large team, and it has been a large team who contributed to and wrote the research report. I do encourage everybody to read it and share it on your social media. A copy is going to be sent to you, and in fact, anyone who registered for the webinar after this, I would encourage you to sign up, use the QR code that's there in front of you now to hear about our updates and opportunities, and also to reach out, not to just me and Vinny, but also to Laura, Debbie, and anyone else who is on this to follow up with any conversations. When we designed this program for young people with learning disabilities, we knew their journey to employment was tough. And our research has shown that an individualized approach for both the young person and the employer can get great results, as we have seen 15 times the national average of young people ending up in employment, paid good employment after the end of our program. I'm really hopeful that this research can start to change the nature of the conversation. I hope it demonstrates that we can do just so much more, and helping young people with learning disabilities to get paid jobs and contribute the way they want to into society. And as I'm trying to see who that is, because it doesn't show on my screen, it's just about whole lives, and the job is just the beginning that can lead to so many other life-enhancing opportunities.
That was my
thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Debbie. I think that is a really positive note to end on. I want to thank you, our panelists. I want to thank everybody who's joined. Please, let's continue the conversation. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.